Hi everyone, my name is Mynah and I'm super happy to be here today for this HalfStack online conference 2020. So the title of the talk today is Live Coding, Humanizing Technology and Algorithms Through Artistic Expression. So what do I mean by humanizing? What I mean is to put aside a little bit our views of technology and algorithms as things that are functional and things that allow us to build other things for a functional purpose, and instead view them as potential mediums to help us communicate something, help us express something, something that goes out of the range of functionality, something that has to do with what makes us human. So human emotions, ideas, stories, anything that comes to our imagination. So this is what this talk is going to be about. I believe live coding is an art form in itself, and it's one that is really interesting because it bridges a gap between worlds that are seemingly very different, and it also brings something that is normally unseen to people, to the general public, to the front stage, literally in front of an audience. So it gives us a chance to communicate with people that are not necessarily programmers or tech savvy. And I believe it's important to do that. And I'll try to explain a little bit later on why. So this is by no means a technical talk. It's really going to be more of a thought experiment and a little bit of insights on what are some angles that we can take in the creative process when we use a programming language as medium, and when we are interested in using algorithms as inspiration for creating. So here's an overview of the things that we are going to cover. First, there's going to be a quick few words on who I am. Then we are going to look at what live coding is, and like very quickly we're going to take a look at what live coding is and a quick mention of some of the most popular live coding frameworks that are around right now. Then we will discuss a few creative approaches that I believe are kind of the pillars for understanding exactly what can happen in the creative process when using something like code. And we'll then go on to exploring some thoughts on why maybe the practice of live coding can have some very positive impacts, first on the person that practices it, but also on a community level for the communication and the discussions that it can open, and for the support in education that it can offer. For its education purposes, and also just because of the fun of it, for being able to have a playground to test our skills and to improve. And we are going to finish all that with some open-ended questions for the future, which hopefully you'll find interesting, and hopefully you'll find yourself wondering about certain possibilities or certain ideas after this talk. So let's dive right in. So very quickly, a few words on who I am. I'm a professional musician. I've been a professional musician for about 18 years. My background is in classical music. I started off studying at university, all the way up to university, studying classical piano. After that, I left my home at the age of 25 to travel, and this is where I picked up the accordion. So mostly of my professional career as a musician, I have spent it working as an accordion player and also working as a composer, an arranger, and a singer from time to time, but mostly being on the accordion. So I've been programming for only 5 years. I discovered programming around 2015, 2016, already at the age of 36. So programming is something that came pretty late into my life. I fell in love with it. I was completely taken by it when I discovered it, and I entered 1 year of self-study where I studied nonstop to start learning, really with the idea that I wanted to take a new direction in my career, and start including some of the things, those exciting things that I was learning at the time. So after 1 year of self-study, I went and did the Founders and Coders full stack coding bootcamp. I was the third cohort in Nazareth in Israel. They have a branch. They are a bootcamp based in London. They have a branch in Israel. So I did that. And after that, I stayed there for almost 2 years, working as a mentor and a course facilitator for Founders and Coders, and being close to the students and sharing and teaching the skills that I had learned during the bootcamp to the new students that were coming. In parallel of that, I was building Earth to Abigail, which is now my full-time occupation. It's a music project, so Earth to Abigail is the name under which I perform as an artist. And it's also the name of my online website where I host a blog where I write on technology and creativity, write tutorial on live coding with Sonic Pi, and things like that. I also give live coding workshops and things like that. So this is me. And now let's take a breath. And now let's get a little bit in the meat of the talk. So before we start talking about creativity and creative approaches and all this, let's just really understand what am I talking about when I'm talking about live coding. So first, I just want to say that in this talk, mostly when I'm going to be talking about live coding, I'm going to be talking about the musical side of things, and this is just because that's my expertise. So when I'm going to refer live coding in this talk, it has to do with music, but live coding includes also visuals and could possibly include other art forms, other components. So live coding is the action of using a programming language to generate music or visuals in real time, and generally this happens in front of an audience. So as I said, in this talk, I'm going to be focusing on the music side of things. TopLab is an organization that was created in 2004 for the promotion of live coding. And since then, there are many local TopLab nodes that appeared everywhere around the world. And these TopLab nodes are a big part of the live coding community, I feel right now. Amazing community with really beautiful artists doing amazing stuff. So quick mention of some of my favorite live coding frameworks. So a little bit like the father or grandfather is Super Collider, which is a sound synthesis engine on top of which many of the more modern live coding platforms are built on. So after Super Collider, you have Tidal Cycles, which is built in Haskell, created by Alex McLean. Has a very big user base, amazing framework, works on patterns in music. Then you have Sonic Pi, created by Sam Aaron, which is a platform that personally my platform of choice, the one that I use the most. After that, you have Foxdot, which is created in Python. You have Orca, you have Ramcode, which is a language and a framework built on top of pure data for creating byte beat music. So specifically for byte beat music, super interesting. And the last one that I'm mentioning here is Estuary, which is a web platform. So it's a browser-based interface that is built on top of Tidal Cycles, with a smaller version of Tidal, which allows collaborations between live coders. So you can log in an ensemble and collaborate with people in Estuary. It was created by David Ogborn and co-created also with Eldad Sabari. And it's the platform that you will see a little bit later in the conference, closing the conference. So you will see it in action with the group Supercontinent. So this is just really a few. There are many, 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 many more frameworks out there. It would be definitely too long to mention, but these are the ones that personally grabbed my attention and that I've tried or looked at or have been interested at. So this is why I'm mentioning them here, but there are so many more. And again, this is just for the music. So visuals is also another completely different side of the story. Okay. So now we're getting ready to dive into the creative process. But before doing that, why do we live code in the first place? Why is it interesting? Why is it even a thing? This question, actually, I thought it was important to bring it up because it's something that people ask me quite frequently after I finish a performance or after a workshop. Mostly people that come to me with these questions are people that either have no experience in programming or have never seen live coding before. So I understand that there's a concept that might seem a little bit strange. So I thought it was important to mention here in this talk to address this question because I think the answer is interesting. What I usually answer to people that tell me this is that for me in a live coding performance, music is only part of the story. It's not the whole picture. So of course, when you go to see an artist that you love, if you go see a band or a singer, primarily you go to hear the music. This is why you love the artist. That is the final result of the work of the artist. Yes, the show can be incredible and amazing, but the essence is the music. Live coding is a little bit different, in my opinion, because in a live coding performance, yes, the music or the visuals or what you're creating is definitely super important, but the code also really has its place, and only the music or the visuals is not the whole story, at least not to me. So this is one of the answers that I give when people tell me, why do you live code? Well, because there is something really beautiful in the code. The music is not only the final result. The code brings me different ways to express myself that are not necessarily related to music. So what does that mean exactly when I say expressing myself with code? So there's a lot of elements to that, but I think that this is where it becomes interesting because this is where we can start seeing this alliance between art and programming and live coding, because when I try to answer that, I leave the musician aside. And things that I can express through code, I think, are things that every programmer can relate to. There has been a lot of people already talking and writing about the fact that the similarities between good code and poetry, for example, the way that we treat a language of code and the way that we would treat a spoken language. So, for me, for example, I have a lot of fun in my live coding, playing around with the names of my variables or my functions or things like that. It's one of the reasons I like Sonic Pi so much, because I feel the language can be, the language itself in its simplicity and the way it's written can be very expressive. So I like to play with things like that. But there's also other concerns that where, as programmers, we can kind of express ourselves through code and kind of be in awe in front of the beauty of it. For example, the specific elegance of a solution. This feeling of looking at a solution for a specific problem and being like, wow, so these are things that are also important when you live code. There's also that feeling that you bring as a programmer. What does it mean when you create elegant code, beautiful code, code that you are satisfied with, that you feel represents an idea. And what we create is music, so it's interesting to take that angle and get away of functionality and explore something that is purely for the human side. There's also something about the fact that everyone codes differently. That's also something I wanted to say. So something about the fact that everyone codes differently. So there's something very intimate in the action of showing your code to someone else. So when you're thinking of showing your code and opening that box in front of an audience, it adds also a completely different dynamic to the performance, which I think is something really interesting to explore. So let's talk a little bit about two general approaches that I see can kind of describe this polarity of music and programming within live coding. So the first approach that I see and that I can kind of relate to is called the reverse engineering approach. I mean, it's not called like this. I like to call it that way, but I invented the term. So the reverse engineering approach, what I mean by that is taking a known piece, a known music piece, or a known style, and reverse engineer it to see how it can be done with code. So you start with a musical idea of something that you know, or something that is relatable, something that is already existing, and you reverse engineer it to understand what would that mean in terms of programming. How would you translate that result into a language using code? So this is the reverse engineering approach. A great example, I feel, of that is coded by Robin Newman. So here, if I go to Sonic Pi. So here you can see it's a Bach Minuet in G. So it's a classical piece written for harpsichord or piano, very famous one by Bach, which Robin coded inside Sonic Pi and literally coded every pattern of each hand. So I'm gonna try and play the audio. I'm gonna hope, I'm using my computer audio, so I hope that it's fine. So here it goes. Scrolling a little bit. So yes, the code is really repetitive, but it's amazing that every pattern is coded. So this for me is a really good example of what I call the reverse engineering approach. And to me, this approach is a little bit similar when you think of a painter, of an artist that paints. If you think of a painter that has this ability to paint something with so much realism that it looks like a photograph. So I'm sure that some people are going to argue maybe that, okay, maybe that kind of lacks creativity because, I don't know, you paint a painting of an orange and it really, really looks like an orange and it's amazing, but it's still just an orange. So maybe some people can argue, well, where's the creativity there if you just take something and just try to make it as resembling as it is in real life? Or you can see it completely the other way and think, well, actually, for someone to be able to understand light and understand shapes and understand colors in such a way that they are able to put on a canvas using a medium that's completely different than what nature uses, to replicate that effect through their own medium. The amount of mastery and artistry that it takes to do that is amazing. And maybe the creativity and the art itself is in the eye and in the way of perceiving. The result is only part of the picture. The process is also very, very important, right? So this is for me what I call the reverse engineering approach, and also the approach where you start with the music and you try to figure out how to do that music in code. Next, we have the algorithmic approach. So the algorithmic approach is to start with an idea that's based on code. So you start with a coding idea and you let the music develop as the consequence of the coding process. So what's interesting in this process, in this angle for me, it's surprises. It's to have an idea that's based on a programming concept or programming idea that you don't necessarily know how this idea is gonna materialize in sounds. So you kind of let the code surprise you in the sound that it creates. And it's something that is a lot of fun and really interesting. So a few months ago, I finished a small project of mine that I did for a few months. I took sorting algorithms. So I took standard sorting algorithms, the ones that we all know. I took bubble sort, insertion sort, selection sort, and merge sort, and started a process just as an experiment to understand, can I take algorithms like this that are, written already, understood and have a specific purpose. Can I take something like that and somehow transpose that into music, but not just for the results in case of sorting, not just for the fact of starting with an unsorted list of sounds and then ending with a sorted list of sounds, but what can happen musically in all that space in between. In other words, I wanted to know if I could not only sonify the result of the algorithm, but its internal process. Because when I was started to study programming, when you first start to study algorithms and things like this, it's not something that's easy to visualize. It took me quite some time to understand certain fundamental concepts. And in that experiment, I was wondering, what if I can approach it through sounds and somehow make it more understandable? Because if I have a hard time visualizing an algorithm and understanding which step exactly happens when, maybe I can hear it. Maybe I can create something that allows me to hear it. And also because the music kind of allows you to stretch time, it kind of allows you to slow down the algorithm and hear each step one after the other. Maybe like a musical debugger, in a way. I mean, there's interesting things that you could experiment with that. I'm sure. That was my initial idea. So I started working on that. I started by writing tutorials for each of these sonifications. If you're interested to hear them, I also made videos, so you can go and check on my YouTube channel and hear some of the sonifications that I've done on the videos there. But then I wanted to push the process a little bit further, because what I realized in the process is that every algorithm had its own particularity. So every sorting algorithm had a specific rhythm to it, or had certain strengths, certain weaknesses. Probably because it's also my flow and the way that I've coded it, and that I've coded the musical parts of it. But things started to appear. Like, for example, I started to notice that somehow bubble sort, I guess because of its swapping effects, somehow bubble sort has something very melodic that I really liked to use for its melodic properties. And merge sort, for example, had a really interesting ambiances and sound effects, because playing with the right side of the list and the left side of the list. So I was playing with panning effects and sounds that were moving a little bit more into space. So that was a property of merge sort. Selection sort had something a little bit more rhythmical. So it was quite interesting. And then I developed the idea to take these basic pieces that I've created, or sonifications, and transform them into a toolbox. So create functions, so sorting functions, and with a whole bunch of name parameters that I could use in my code in order to build pieces of music. So not using them as sonification pieces on their own, but rather use the process that they're doing. So the process that each function is doing a sorting, and their particularities, to help me compose, to have building blocks to help me compose other completely different pieces of music. So I wanted to make myself an algorithmic toolbox that was going to be as customizable as possible, where I could reuse in different contexts, with different styles of music, different notes, different sounds, etc. So this is what it looks like. Sorry. Okay. So for example, this is what it looks like. So if I run this file, there is no sound. These are really just functions. So this is the bubble sort function. And here I have selection sort. And you can see here all the different parameters that I can add. So these are constants that I use, that are, I put default values. But you could customize it and pass in any value that you want. So you could adjust which notes, frequencies you passed in. You can pass in a function to be executed once the list is sorted. So it can allow you for multi-composition kind of musical pieces. You can change the volume. You can decide to play certain elements or not. You can change the synthesizers, the drum sounds, etc., etc. So this was the initial experiment that I had. The first time that I played with the toolbox was in the context of the Palindrome Day in February, so February 2nd, 2020, where you can see on the picture, I know it's very small, but the idea of it was that I was using all these functions, so the 4 algorithmic functions, and building a separate piece of music with these functions as building blocks. And I was trying to find a way of how this can be interesting on a human level, because I didn't want the performance to be just kind of an exercise of like, look what you can do with sorting algorithms. That was kind of not the point. It was really more of using this as as tools to build something meaningful. So I started to think about how there could be some kind of interaction between the sorting of the computer and the own process of the artist that is creating the piece and wants to communicate something. What am I saying with this? What am I saying with the fact that I'm sorting a list? Was what I was trying to communicate. So in this video for the Palindrome Day, I did a performance that's called Sorting Myself Out, and I made a parallel between how the process of sorting a list is very similar to the process that we have to go through when we need to sort ourselves out, where we need to understand ourselves and we need to go through life challenges and figure things out and put things back into order. So in these performances, I would use each algorithm, and every time that a list would get sorted, you can see the blue writing on the right. The program would output quotes from authors, from famous authors that had to do about this, about also going about the internal process of, as humans, what does it mean to sort ourselves out. So that was my first attempt at playing around with the algorithm toolbox. And I think it's a decent example of what you can do when you have fun playing around with algorithms for what they are, and then you let the music kind of emanate from it and you let it surprise you. That's what I call the algorithmic approach. So is it really all the time that black and white? That, you either have a reverse engineering approach where you start thinking about the music and that's the angle that you do and you enter to that, or you start with an algorithmic approach and then you start with the code and you enter to that. Is it always that black and white? No, really not. These are really just my way of understanding the fundamentals of, I think, this alliance between programming and music that we find in live coding. But there's so many different shades of gray, and every artist will position themselves anywhere in that scale. And this is what is amazing and beautiful. And this is what makes live coding an art form in itself. It's because it's unique. We all have our own unique way to use it and to express ourselves through it. So now that we have already kind of a good overview of what is live coding, and we've did a little bit of overview also of the possible creative approaches that you can take when you're working with a medium like code, let's push this a little bit further, and maybe that's where things might get a little bit weird. So for me, this section of the talk, when I was preparing it, I was thinking about it more like in Harry Potter. So you have Dumbledore with the pensieve, and he puts thoughts in the pensieve. So I'm a Harry Potter fan. Don't judge me, but that's the image that came to my mind. So this section is going to be a little bit like me pouring thoughts into a pensieve, and hopefully in the end it's all going to come together, and we're going to be able to raise some interesting questions from it. So what are some thoughts on the impact that something like live coding can have? Because of course, I mean, yeah, playing music is fun. Art is fun. And it's easy to think like, well, yeah, this is, coding for fun. Like, what can we really get from it? Like, apart from entertainment, is there any benefits or anything that we can learn from that go beyond just chilling and having fun and exploring an art form with something that we know? So to walk you through a little bit the reasons why I think live coding can be such a powerful tool, I'm gonna need to go back and tell a few stories, and these are thoughts that I'm gonna put in the pensive. So bear with me. Hopefully it's all gonna make sense by the end of the talk. So thought number one, Ted Nelson. Ted Nelson is a writer and a philosopher, a sociologist, and a technology visionary, really, that was mostly active during the 60s, I think all the way up to the 80s, and is still active, still published. His latest book, I think, was published in 2008, which is the one that you see here with the cover, Geeks Bearing Gifts. So Ted Nelson is a technology lover. He's the one that kind of brought the terms hypertext and hypermedia. So he's one of the first ones that had some vision of what we now know as HTTP, which is crazy when you think about it. And and he's also the writer of a very iconic book called Computer Lib / Dream Machines. It's a 2-sided book, which was published, I think, in 1974. Yeah. So I discovered him about a year ago, doing some random research on the internet. And I completely fell in love with his writing because of his passion for technology and the way that he writes. You can feel that his hopes and dreams for a better world, and how and the visions that he had on how technology could help build that better world that he was envisioning. So to me, he's an incredibly inspiring figure. I love reading him. I love listening to him speak. And I think there's something I find also really interesting about him is that he's not a software engineer. He's not a programmer. He's not someone working in tech. He's a creative. He's a writer, just with a massive interest and passion for anything related to computers. So this, I guess, this is a part of why I really connect to his work, because somehow I somehow identify to that side of things. And there is, in his book Geeks Bearing Gifts, so the book where you see the cover, there is a chapter where I feel that he brings up something that is super interesting and that kept me thinking, something that really kept me thinking for a long time. So in his book is basically a take on computer history, very, very interesting take on computer history. And there is a few chapters where he explains the beginnings of when we started to catalog all the characters in languages that were gonna form the character sets that we were going to be using in computing systems. So all the ASCII system and things like this, like at the time of creation, where maybe without necessarily realizing it, we basically influence culture. People that build these technologies, people that were working in the technology industry at this period, helped shape tools that would infiltrate the culture, not just for their functionality, but literally in the way that people express themselves, the way that people talk to each other, the way that people express their emotions to each other. I think a good example of that is the emoji culture now, where words are replaced by these little characters that now mean something to us, and somehow is infiltrating the mainstream culture to a certain point. So there is, to me, something very, very fascinating when you think about that phenomenon, and also when I think about the responsibility of working and creating these systems that have such a huge impact on generations and generations to come, that came afterwards. So this is thought number one, Ted Nelson, and how technology influenced culture, and way beyond the use that we have for it. So thought number two, accessibility. So when I started live coding, the approach of the reverse engineering approach was the approach that I adopted because it seemed the most natural to me. It was natural for me to take something that I know, like music or a music idea, and learn to transpose it through something new, like code. And I was really excited by the problem-solving aspect of it. But there's another element that was really interesting to me, and it was to bring an audience to discover something new, something they don't know, through something that was familiar to them. So this is what I mean by accessibility, to take the way in of something that people already connect to and use that in order to open up their minds to something new. So this approach, this accessibility approach, allowed me for really interesting experiences. I had the chance to introduce computer programming to people who'd never been in contact with that before. So I had the chance to literally play in venues where normally, standard venues for standard shows where the audience didn't necessarily know what live coding was, but because the type of music that I was playing was fitting in the venue, then it was fine, and the audience was not disappointed on the music, and at the same time interested to see what is this new thing that they are seeing because of the aspect of code. I also introduced live coding with Sonic Pi in Israel, and I created a new top lab node for a very, very small, for the moment, live coding community in Israel. So if you are from Israel and you'd like to live code, I'm just saying the invitation is there, and please look for us, Top Lab Israel. We're on Facebook, or just talk to me directly. So through the connection of through that accessibility process, I was able to connect with people that had no connection to programming at all, and open a bit their minds on that. Okay, so thought number three, and now I need to talk, I think, more quickly. So thought number three, the benefits of performing. So to talk about this, I need to tell a little bit of a story, and I'm gonna try to tell the story as quickly as I can. So in my last periods of mentoring, when I was teaching in the coding bootcamp, and I was mentoring the students there. So in the last month that I did, we did a field trip with the students, and we took them to visit a big high-tech company where they had the chance to talk to HR, they had the chance to see a little bit the environment, etc., etc. So we are sitting in a conference room in this company. The HR, very nice woman, comes in, talks to the students, and then there is a time for Q&A. And when the time for Q&A comes, one of my students raises his hand and asks a question to the woman and says, I understand that when I go to an interview, I need to be confident, I need to look someone in the eyes, I need to present myself well. But what if I've never really practiced looking someone in the eyes? What if I've never really done that naturally? Should I fake it? Should I do it even though that's not me? Or should I follow the advice that is what generally people say, which is I should stay myself. I should be myself, because being myself, I don't have this confidence. And the HR woman thought about it for a little time. I'm really sorry, I don't remember her name. But she thought about it for a little time, and she told him, yes, I think it is better if you fake it. It's better if you try, because this is something really important, and it's better if you fake it. And I was in the back of the class, and I was listening to that, and my heart was going to him, because I remember what it's like. I used to be so shy, and I used to be so reserved, and I had such a hard time to put myself out there. And I started thinking, how did I work myself through it? What are the things that allowed me to become better at these things? Because yes, I used to be very, very close on myself, and no self-esteem and no self-confidence. And how did I turn that around? And thinking about it, I realized that the big reason why I turned that around was because of the fact that I was working as a performer. So it's the fact of performing with my craft. And during performance, I realized this is when I learned to master confidence. I learned to master and to have decent self-esteem. I learned to communicate. I learned to understand this border of being yourself, but at the same time, that side of yourself that is appropriate for a certain situation, especially when you deal with professional contexts. So many things that I learned while performing, and that got me thinking. And I started to think: are there other good uses of someone of the act of performing? And I realized that yes, there is something when you know that you are coding something that will be seen. First, like we said, it's very intimate, and also it's an incredible exercise to put yourself in this uncomfortable position over and over and over again. And the reason why you do it is because the thing you're doing is keeping you there, whether it's music or whatever your craft. This is what's keeping you there. It's keeping you there because it's fun. And because it's fun, it pushes you to repeat the experience, even though it's uncomfortable. And repeating that experience, you slowly learn to control your anxiety. You learn how to build up your self-confidence. And not only that, but the reaction of an audience to receive the acknowledgement of your work has also something very therapeutical, almost, to receive that kind of feedback. And that does help a lot in the process of building self-confidence and of also building communication skills, building a whole bunch of human skills that we all need in order to have a successful career. So these are all the thoughts that I have. And now in a few minutes, it's pushing me to just see what we can do to bring it all together. So I'd like to leave you with questions for the future. I'd like to leave you by asking, what would it be like if we use live coding to make technology more accessible to the general public? All right. What would it be like if we integrated a creative performing practice in our education system to help young adults build valuable social skills? So what would it be like? These are just questions that I'm wondering in total utopia world. What would it be like? And also, what would it be like if every programmer treated their work as a form of art? How would that change the mindset that we put into our work? And would that bring some benefits? Is there benefits of one mindset over the other? What would change? What would be the consequence of doing something like that? So that's it for me, guys. I leave you with open-ended questions because I think that I'm just at the really beginning of my journey. I think that there's a lot of, I think life coding in general is still relatively young, and there's room for a lot of things to be explored and a lot of experimentation and development. But also because I believe that I'm just at the tip of the iceberg of my own exploration of this art form. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had fun walking through these creative thoughts with me, and that somehow it inspired you. I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to contact me either on my blog or on social media. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to hear what you think if some of these questions that I asked in the end, if some of them ring a bell or bring in some thoughts, please share. So for now, wishing everyone a super great continuation of the day, and goodbye.
So Mynah, that was an amazing session. I think it's really cool how you're able to share so openly what you do and what your process is, and like really nicely built on your like I'd say concert, but performance from earlier. Just really, really cool. Thank you so much for doing that.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm really, really glad that you enjoyed it. It was like, it's first time experience for me. So it was like a really fun opportunity to have the chance to like talk about what I do a little bit and share my work.
Yeah. So you talked a bit about how you got started in this, but like, what was that moment that made you say, hey, I want to combine tech with my music passion? What made that kind of flip for you, or become that moment of like, this is what I want to do
next? Wow. It's a bit of a crazy story. It's a bit of a long story, but well, if anyone is interested in reading the uncensored story, I actually published it on my blog, where there's a full story on it. But the big lines were that I've always been a movie musician. I've always been someone who traveled for a very long time, my whole professional career. And when I came to a point where after 15 years of working with other artists, always playing the music of other people, primarily, always kind of at the service of other people's music, I really wanted to become my own artist. But I was in this problem that I was moving all the time. So in order to like put like a real big show together and have like a steady band of musicians always playing with you and really build something, it was really hard with the lifestyle that I was living. Yeah. So after a lot of ups and downs, and after this crazy tour, my last tour that I did in the UK with an Indian artist, I just kind of decided, you know what, I need a break from this. I'm going to go back to my home. I need to recover from all the stress of working in the entertainment industry, on the road all the time, touring. And I got to my home in Portugal, took a break, and I don't know, I got into this idea. I wanted to be able to be independently, be able to put a show together without necessarily being dependent on having people around. And then I started to think, you know what, well, maybe I need the help of technology here.
I'm kind of reminded of like when I was a kid, there was this guy who played like 30 instruments at once, but he had like the harmonica and the flute. And he was,
right.
Like, juggling them around. I don't remember what his name was, right. Like a very famous musician, except now you can do it with text so you don't look ridiculous, right?
I mean, yeah, and also like the synchronicity of the whole body. Also, it's that is crazy, and for someone like me, you know, technique for playing an instrument. Like everything that requires body control was never really my strong point. I really enjoy working with my mind. I really enjoy creating and kind of have an outlet for my ideas without all the technical restraints.
Right.
So this is how I started. It was that idea of integrating technology to kind of fill the gaps that I couldn't fill with a steady band of people around me.
I mean, it really is amazing what constraints will do for you. You know, like when you have infinite possibility and infinite resources, you often just get nothing done. It's kind of like a gym that's open 24 hours a day, you never go because it's always there to avoid. Versus a gym that's open like 6 hours a day, you manage to go because you got to go in during that time, right? So
definitely
constraints really help move things along. So what are some of the challenges you've run into sort of making a big shift like that? Like have you like run into anything where you're like, this is frustrating or this doesn't make sense or what am I doing? Or...
frustrating? No, I don't know if frustrating. Definitely scary.
Sure, yeah.
You know, like definitely intimidating. But overall, the experience was amazing. I think that for me, the challenge, but also the most beautiful thing was to open myself up to a completely different new world, different kind of people that did things super interesting that I had absolutely no clue about. Just that whole process of realizing that there's actually a world out there. I mean, as artists, sometimes as musicians, like I feel we live a lot in our bubbles sometimes because of our lifestyle. You know, we mostly work when people are chilling out. You know, like we have kind of this counter.
Well, now we're all living in bubbles, but yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because like developers often feel that way too. Like they're in their own bubble and people don't do what they do. And a lot of times developers are really creative, but people perceive them as really like boring and methodical and specific. But the best developers are very creative because they need to think of new ways out of difficult problems. And so, yeah.
Exactly.
So how are you finding this like pandemic stay at home thing? Is it giving you more time or less time to focus? Are you feeling more inspired, less inspired, or is it just different? Like you mentioned, you don't have your instruments with you right now, so you're like,
right,
it's different,
right?
Yeah,
it is. I mean, it was a shift. In my particular story, I'm one of those people that got like stuck away from my home.
I just read about people who are stuck in airports for the past 2 months without showers. So at least it's not crazy like that. I was really feeling really thankful when I read
definitely.
terrible stories of being stuck in a transit airport, you know. But anyway, sorry.
Wow, crazy. No, it's insane, the situation right now. I mean, I really, really sympathize for it. I mean, it's very, very, very crazy. And I mean, my situation, it was like it was almost a blessing also because it was insane. I had this inspiration some months ago, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I just felt like I have to go visit my mom in Canada. I was living in Israel and I just felt like this urge. I knew I was going to see her. The plan was I was going to see her later on, like a couple of months later. But I just had this strong, like instinct, like got to book a ticket, got to go. I'm going for 2 weeks. And I booked the ticket. And I get here, I was supposed to stay here for like 10 days. I literally left with a backpack and my laptop, like 2 pair of jeans. Yeah. And a mic. Somehow I bought my microphone for some reason. I bought my microphone and my laptop and a backpack with a couple of clothes, and left my life in Israel to come here. And then, all hell broke loose, like, wow.
It is crazy. It's interesting. Like I know some people who've had coronavirus. Actually, know someone who died from it. Like it's a pretty intense time. But what's so strange about it is the uncertainty, right? Like we just don't know how long it's going to last. I mean, we're learning more, but it's just the uncertainty around it is what really gets people. And I find that
Definitely.
having creative outlets like you have is a way to sort of bring some balance. Like for me, it's yoga. For you, it's music and tech, and like obviously engineering is very zenful at times as well. And,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we have a minute or so left. Like, what's next for you? What do you want to do that you haven't like tried yet, or what are you excited about experimenting with next?
Now I'm kind of toying with ideas for a project that I've been having for a little while, which is creating. I'm not sure if it's going to be in the shape of a book or an online course, but I'd like to create some kind of a course to talk about music using a programming vocabulary. So basically, explain music theory. So explain music theory using like vocabulary that programmers understand. So instead of talking of scales and notes, talking in terms of data structures and functions and things like this. Yeah. Because I see a lot of similarities between the language of music and the language of programming as a
I know a lot of musicians turned engineers, or I actually have a friend who's a PhD in music theory who then became a software engineer. So there's definitely
interesting
that. And it was funny. We had a corporate retreat years ago, and we said, bring your instrument, like, or bring whatever you play. And like 10 people were bass players out of like the 20 people, which was kind of funny.
Wow.
So there's just like, there's definitely a lot of that, a lot of overlap. And it makes sense because it is, there's patterns and there's algorithms and there's trends and things that you can see, and they're very similar in some ways and quite different in others, which is what's cool about it. So
yeah, well, exactly. So that's what's next for me. That's my next project.
That sounds amazing. I look forward to seeing that. Thanks so much for joining us at HalfStack, and
thank you so much.
Lovely presentations and music, and stay tuned a bit later on. We're going to have your worldwide ensemble, which is amazing as well, I'm sure. So,
yes, super confident.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. Thank you.